Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Ya Aliyu, Ya Azimu, Ya Halimu, Ya Ali. Anta Rabbi.
Assalamu alaikum, family. Peace, love, and light. It's your brother Abdul Rahman Ba. And I just got through with Asa prayer. So I'm feeling amazing at this moment. Alhamdulillah. I was struggling this morning, wasn't really feeling good. My stomach was tossing and turning. But alhamdulillah, all is well. All is well, my brothers and sisters. Thank Allah. Alhamdulillah. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. La hawla wa la quwwata illa billahi wa huwa aliyyul azim. I'm gonna do a little zikr. Ya Kareem, 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 Ya Kareem. Ya Kareem, 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 Ya Yakari, 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 Yakari. Yakari, 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 Yakari. Yakari, 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 Yakari. Peace, 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 peace. We are peaceful. I want to pick this book back up and finish off where we left. The Destruction of the Lower Self by Sheikh Sufi. A Sufi manual for self-transformation. We left off with the four enemies, and that the nafs, the lower self, is the first enemy. And we left off, and the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said the lower self on the inside is worse enemy than 70 devils on the outside. The lower self is often compared to a wild animal. When this animal is strong, it is a fierce enemy. When this animal is weak, it is easy to defeat. Sheikh Ahmadu Bamba teaches that the weapon to defeat the nafs is hunger and fasting. He said that a true Sufi eats less, talks less, and sleeps less. One Sufi once said to me, starve the nafs, then you can defeat it. My master has said that eating too much food makes the heart hard and heavy. A full bird cannot fly. Eating less weakens the animal self, nafs. One aspect of the nafs that is difficult to overcome is the ego, the false I. This ego, this false I, must die. The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam has said in one hadith, die before you die. True Sufism is death before death. The death of the lower self must take place in order for the flower of the higher self to bloom and blossom. As I read these words, I think about my life, and that's one thing I do know, that I do have knowledge of, and that is my lower self, because I spent majority of my life operating from that lower self, right? So now my mission is to operate through my higher self. It's opposite. And one way of doing that is dying before you die. Dying of the lower self. As it says here, the death of the lower self must take place in order for the flower of the higher self to bloom and blossom. Then he goes into 3 deaths. On the Sufi path, there are 3 evictions, death that must take place. Fanafi Sheikh, death in the Sheikh. Fanafi Rasul, death in the Prophet. Fanafi Allah, death in God. Of these 3 deaths, the first one is the most difficult, the death in the Sheikh. With the death in the Sheikh comes the death of the ego. A disciple must become extinct, disappear into his Sheikh. Ooh, disappear. The Sheikh has medicine to cure the sickness of the soul. The disciple must take on the adab, the character of his Sheikh. He must trust his Sheikh at all times. The Sufi says, if you doubt, you're out. One great Sufi master, Sheikh Abdul Qadir Jilani, has said a disciple must be like a dead person in the hands of the washer with his Sheikh. You know, I've been knowing Sheikh Sufi maybe 10 years, but I never spent time with him. The last 3 years online, Zoom meetings. But when I actually got to sit with him, and you know when you have when you're getting something special, because the enemy tries everything to keep you from getting them jewels. On my way to the Alchemist of Happiness tour, mentally, I was under a spiritual attack. I almost missed my plane. Me and my wife, we had an argument that day. Something was going on with my kids, my family. Everything to keep me from going or taking that trip. But I kept pushing. And that's how you know something special, that you finna receive something special. Well, that's how I know in my life, through my experience. Before I receive a gift, there's always trials and tribulations. There's always tarbiyah. When I heard Sheikh Ibrahim Fall say, well, I didn't actually hear him, of course, but when Sheikh talked and told us that one of the things that Sheikh Ibrahim Fall said, the harder the better. Because there's two things with trials and tribulations. We go through trials and tribulations to purify our soul or raise our station. The harder the better. I went to O'Hare Airport. I was supposed to go to Midway. That's across, it's across town, man. But I made it. Alhamdulillah. And it took me where I needed to be. Inside the heart of the true Sheikh can be found the light of Muhammad, Nur Muhammad. When the disciple dies in the Sheikh will put his hands in the hands of Rasul, the Prophet. I died when I went to see Sheikh. When we met up, I'm not going to tell you everything that happened because some of it is just for me, personal. But he did a lot. He gave me things and he made me do some things. One of them is that I had to do the most zikrs I ever done. I had a spiritual bath, talismans. Alhamdulillah. So inside the heart of the true Sheikh can be found the lights of Muhammad, Nur Muhammad. When the disciple dies in the Sheikh will put his hand in the hands of Rasul, Prophet. The Sufi Bayat, the initiation, is often called taking hand. Each Sufi order must have a chain. I can't pronounce this word, so asafullah. This silsila, chain of transmission, gives the lineage of the order that can be traced back from the living Sheikh to Prophet Muhammad. The disciple at this stage must take on the adab of the Rasul. He must study, emulate the character of the Rasul and strive to make his imitation real. The disciple will find the light of Allah inside the light of Muhammad. So, from my understanding, is that my Sheikh has a master, Serene Salihu in Baki, right? Which is the son of Khadim Rasul, Serene Tuba, Sheikh Ahmadu Bamba. And Sheikh Ahmadu Bamba is the servant of the Prophet, is Khadim Rasul. See? The chain. And my Sheikh emulates Serene Salihu. And we, his disciples, emulate our Sheikh. Right now, our Sheikh's traveling, giving lectures in Germany, in France. He was just somewhere else. I can't remember. But alhamdulillah, that's what you want to emulate. That's what it's saying here. A disciple at this stage must take on the adab of Rasul. He must study, emulate the character of the Rasul and strive to make his imitation real. The disciple will find the light of Allah inside the light of Muhammad. Nur al-Nur, light upon light. One of the most effective ways to reach Fanafi Rasul is Salatu Nabi, sending prayers on the Prophet and reading the Qasas of Sheikh Ahmadu Bamba. Sheikh Ahmadu Bamba once said, reading my writings is better than studying with another Sheikh from another Sufi order. The Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam is a doorway to the divine presence. Fanafi Rasul leads to Fanafi Allah. The secrets of the bay'ah is in the Quranic verse. The hand of Allah is over the hands. When the Prophet Muhammad gave the bay'ah, now let me say that again. The secrets of the bay'ah is in the Quranic verse. The hand of Allah is over their hands. When the Prophet Muhammad gave the bay'ah, Allah said that his hand was over their hands, and that the bay'ah pledge was really to Allah. At the stage of Fana fi Allah, the soul has reached Rasul, union with its source, Allah. I'm going to end it right there because it's going to go into the second enemy. So we covered the first enemy, the self. I had a dream years ago as a young man. I was on a train in transit, traveling. And as I was on this train, I was having a fight with somebody I could not see. I seen his body, but I couldn't see his face. And we was fighting. I was whooping him, like the Matrix whooping him. But the question is, who was winning? The lower self or the higher self? We know that Native American proverb about the two wolves within inside. And the young man asked his grandfather who was winning. And he said, the one you feed. Assalamu alaikum.